Welcome into Film Tank, the weekly podcast that covers both new and classic cinema. On this bonus episode of Film Tank, we discuss the films and also other properties that make up Universal Orlando's Halloween Horror Nights 2018. If you would like to get in touch with Film Tank, you can always email us at filmtankshow@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Film Tank Show. And you can listen to all of our episodes on our website, filmtankshow.com, or on iTunes. And now, here are your hosts, Nick Cheney, Toussaint Egan, and myself, Alex Diekman. Hey there, everybody! Welcome in to a bonus episode of Film Tank. Haven't done one of these in a hot minute. I am Alex Diekman, and along with me today is Kenny Marcellus.
Hey.
Hi.
I'm back.
I know, you were just here, and you're back again. This is a very special occasion.
Fucking up the whole program. I come in, and it's your first bonus episode in how long?
3 years? Something like that?
2.5 years.
2.5 years.
I can tell you right now, our last bonus episode took place April 26, 2016.
So we actually probably recorded in December of the previous year?
Probably. No, this was back when I think we were at least a month out or so.
Oh, okay.
And it was a very random bonus episode on Ghost in the Shell, The Controversy.
Oh!
With a very wonderful picture made by Alex.
Oh, well, I mean, when in Rome.
Yeah. Ironically, for some weird reason, one of our bonus episodes was just Deadpool.
Oh, okay.
I don't know why.
That was a bonus episode?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Just seems like a random, like, the sequel with a regular episode, but
Yeah.
I wonder if we just, were
We were on
scheduling.
we were on a different plan back then.
Well, and I think we were, like, our output was like, oh, we'll do this and that, and
Mm-hmm.
then, which, I mean, it's largely the same, but
Speaking
a
of
little more
different-
lax.
Different plans,
Mm-hmm.
I think this show's going to be a different plan because I'm a pain in the ass. And that's why it's a bonus episode and going to be very different.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that's okay. I mean, this episode... By the way, that's Nick Cheney, by the way, who
Hey.
has just been speaking for the last 2 minutes. This bonus episode was dreamed up by Kenny. But
Wow.
the first dream he had was getting myself to go with him to Halloween Horror Nights, which he's been cracking at me for the last, 3 years to try to go. And since I, for the most part, don't care for haunted houses and other Halloween-type things, I've given him a firm no every other time. And for whatever...
Kenny, no means no.
Yeah. Seriously.
Tell that to the other people who attend Halloween Horror Nights, as that event is just on its way towards somebody getting sued at some point.
I will say, as someone who does not like haunted anything, like, I'll see horror movies, but, like, all this shit I'm not into, but I'm very excited to hear about the properties. I just think about all these significant others that get dragged to places like these, basically against their will.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you mean by on its way to somebody getting sued.
Oh, all of the assault that happens
Oh, yeah,
from
sure.
the patrons just
those,
completely crossing the line with the actors.
No, those lawsuits are a regular
Oh, okay.
occurrence. Yeah, no, that's
I guess
no-go.
I mean one that makes a dent and changes the
yeah.
program.
They fucking print money with that event. Nothing's going to make a dent.
I don't know, man.
Liability slush fund going on.
So, anyways, the idea for the episode and to myself going to Halloween Horror Nights was obviously Kenny's, as this is one of his favorite times of the year and also one of his favorite things to do, going to Universal Studios Orlando and going to Halloween Horror Nights. So, he cracked the code somehow. I went, myself, my wife Emily, Kenny, and his wife Jenny all went to Orlando, really for just a weekend, although you guys stayed until Monday. But it was a very long day and a half for myself and Emily. But that being said, we made it to Universal Studios and went to Halloween Horror Nights. And I don't know everything that we're going to talk about on this episode regarding the evening, but one of the things we are definitely going to mention are the major properties that were at the event this year. Most notably, Stranger Things, and in addition, Poltergeist, Trick or Treat, Halloween 4, The Return of Mike Myers, and then a couple other people were sprinkled in scare zones, including Chucky, which was a bit of a disappointment. So, For any listeners that are just kind of jumping on this and may not have an idea of really what Halloween Horror Nights is or exactly how it operates, Kenny, do you want to give like a brief overview of exactly what it is and
Sure.
kind of the magnitude of what it's become over the last decade or so?
Sure. So Halloween Horror Nights is in its 28th year this year. It's been an event basically since Universal Studios opened in Orlando, and it's grown progressively larger as time's gone on. It really kind of was its own just regular Halloween event with just haunted houses for largely the most part of its history up until about, I mean, it had gotten bigger and bigger. It had grown over the years, as a lot of events do, and especially at Universal Studios, it's become a very major resort. But it wasn't really until about 7 or 8 years, I want to say 2012, maybe 13, when they brought The Walking Dead in as a property, and the event really was put on the map and really just kind of exploded in popularity at that point. And then other notable intellectual properties that they brought in over the last couple of years. American Horror Story was a really big one for a couple of years, and then this year, really, it's just kind of gone astronomically like out of this fucking atmosphere with Stranger Things. It's really been a thing, but
well, they stopped allowing people in the park, which Universal are pretty much whores. So the fact that they started
So that
saying
was
a firm, you can't, we're sold out, can't come in.
Sold out for the first time that I know of this past weekend, 2 of the nights.
Which I didn't, I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't even know they had a level that could be sold out.
Oh, if you saw pictures from the park that night, it literally was at capacity. Like
it felt super crowded when we went, and that was nothing.
That was not bad. No.
Yeah. So,
but to answer your question a little bit more thoroughly, it's it's Universal Studios, so they closed the park down to the regular public at about, I think it's 5:00. Yeah. It's a hard ticket event, and so they sweep the park out. All the daytime guests have to leave unless you have the ticket for the nighttime. You can stay in these couple designated areas, and then they open the park back up at 6:30, and a handful of the attractions are still open, but the main draw is the haunted houses. This year there's 10 of them, which is quite a few. It's more than they've ever had. It's been 9 for a long time. But this year they're up to 10 haunted houses. They've got 5 scare zones, which are just sort of areas on the walkway, like the midway of the park, that you sort of walk through to get to, each haunted house or each attraction. So there's 5 of those. And then they've just got shows here and there sprinkled throughout the park. One main dance kind of show in the Fear Factor Stadium, but it's just a gigantic Halloween overlay of the park, which is really interesting because, as you saw when we were there during the day, during regular hours of the park, the park is normal. It's its own.
Yeah, I mean there's
a couple of props here and there and a couple decorations, but by and large, when the event starts,
they take a lot of tarps off things.
They take tarps off, but they sort of roll stuff out during that time when they're sweeping the park out. But all these haunted houses are back in the backstage areas that you don't go to as a normal daytime guest, and it's just really interesting how the park seems to turn into this entirely different atmosphere for the event. And they've had different numbers over the years, but the way they sort of do the houses and what's prompted this episode tonight, they have some of the haunted houses are just original stories that they come up with, their creative team. But then some of the other houses are these properties. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of what makes Halloween Horror Nights stand out from just going to your average Halloween haunted house.
Yeah, I mean, we went to Great America, and they had a Hellfest haunted house, and that was a get for them.
Sure. But, it's what makes Universal fun for film junkies is going and experiencing the movie in a ride. And so what they do with these haunted houses, and they do a very, very good job of it because they put a lot of money and a lot of time and creative effort into it, is they create a haunted house based around these properties that they go out and get. And some of them that they secure are big-time properties. They're hot properties. They're also not afraid to dig back into the past, which has been a fun thing over the years that I've gone. They love their classic horror films, and we'll get into some of that as we go on. But that's sort of in a nutshell. That's Halloween Horror Nights. It's just kind of a fun mix of movies and properties that you're familiar with, and then just regular good old haunted houses that they come up with.
Yeah. So, just kind of an overall thing. What really makes you like Halloween Horror Nights so much? As you are definitely what I would consider a fanboy of Halloween Horror Nights,
for sure.
and just Universal Orlando in general.
Sure.
But every year it is on the map for you to go at least once, potentially multiple times, and it's
going
like
twice this year,
right?
Yeah.
And it's like not up for debate. You're going. So what is it that this event does that drives you to always want to be going back every single year?
That's interesting because I'm pretty much just by and large a thrill seeker, and so that's why I do go to a lot of amusement parks and stuff like that. But what makes Universal Studios separate, and why I love the park with or without Halloween Horror Nights, I love, because I'm so into movies as well. It's such a unique. I mean, Disney's got an element of it, but Disney, when you go to Disney World or Disneyland, like, you're seeing these stories that are told by Disney, and it's not, you're not necessarily experiencing the film. Universal's thing has always been ride the movies, and so what I love about Universal is just that. It's sort of that mix of thrills with these movies that I love and these properties that I love. And same sort of goes for Halloween. As much as I love Halloween, as much as I love horror movies, there's just something different about Halloween Horror Nights. I go to a lot of local haunted houses. I love just my general horror. And a lot of the time, admittedly, those are better haunted attractions. They're better. They're scarier. They're sometimes more creative. But there's just something about Universal and getting to experience, not just experience a movie that I'm already a fan of, but they just do such a good job of it. As you just sort of mentioned, we went and saw Hellfest, and then we went to Six Flags, who was featuring Hellfest in one of their houses, and it just wasn't good. It was sort of like some of the scenes were recognizable. The character from the film was there, but it's like, it's just not executed well.
They had one really good scene, the scene with all of the blank faces in the room. That was actually really well done. But other than that, I mean, when you can only really remember one scene from a haunted house, that's not good.
Sure. Whereas opposed to going to Halloween Horror Nights, Poltergeist was fucking incredible. They put you in that movie. And not only did they put you in the movie, but the way that they go about telling the story and sort of giving it their own flair, they can recreate scenes perfectly. They really can. But they don't just stop at that. They will go beyond just recreating a scene and putting you in a scene you've seen in the movie, and they tell the story creatively. Sometimes they add their own flair, something that maybe wasn't in the movie, but something that needs to be there as an element of storytelling in a haunted house. And they just do such a good job of executing that mix. Mm-hmm. That's what tends to keep me coming back to Horror Nights.
Yeah. So,
can I ask a very random question?
Please. Ask
On average, what is like the size of how many people get to go in at a time?
It's continuous.
So you just keep going. Okay.
It's a
I didn't know if,
steady line of people. Yeah.
I didn't know if they were like four.
There are so many people that it would be a 6-hour line.
Figured.
If you
so
sure.
So it is like you're just going through a queue basically through the house.
And without getting into the nuts and bolts of haunted houses, really, because I know this is more or less to talk about the movies that we were going to discuss. Yeah. But when I say a lot of the other events that I go to are they tend to be better, is because Halloween Horror Nights' popularity has grown so large. The crowds are so fucking massive that the only way to keep capacity moving through these houses is to keep that steady, what they sort of call a conga line of people. Whereas when you go to some of these smaller events, they can isolate you a little better. They can send you through in small groups that can pulse the line instead of just a constant. And so you get into these scenes in these haunted houses, and they can really hone in on you and scare the shit out of you. And Horror Nights, it's not that scary because of that. Like, you definitely have moments where they'll startle you, but it's not as scary because you can't get that one-on-one attention. But it's just something about the way that they put you in those movies. It's fantastic.
Well, speaking of that, so let's just start with the big one, I guess, as we did when we were there, which was Stranger Things.
Sure.
Myself and Emily were looking forward to this because we had never seen any of the Stranger Things seasons prior to this year. And once we figured out we were going and that this haunted house was only going to be based on the first season, we watched the first season and did not partake in the second. We watched it with you and your wife, Kenny.
Binged it.
I know, pretty much, yeah. So first things first, we got to the haunted house and waited in this stupid line for it as it wasn't actually open when the park opened, which, that's just poor operations for a large event like this, but, that's fine. Just going to put that out there.
Especially for your marquee.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Which is right in front of the park. I mean, come on now. At any rate, so first Halloween Horror Nights experience, and it was, at least for me, not a scary haunted house in the slightest, but if it were just an attraction at Universal Studio, it would be rated better than almost everything they've done in the last 5 years,
man.
other than Potter.
I'm glad you say that. And again, not to go down this route too far, but these haunted houses at Horror Nights, I've told you this in the past. I almost don't even consider them haunted houses. These are temporary attractions that they put up. They work on 9 months out of the year, and they're open for a month and a half. And it's amazing to me that will, after Halloween, will be removed and never seen again. These are brilliant attractions that would stand the test of time for years if they left it up. And it's just incredible. And the fact that, we sort of love the rides that are some of the more old school rides with live actors in them and stuff. And these haunted houses are just
Based
full
around that. Yeah.
Sure. And it's incredible. So I'm really glad that you like that element of it.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I mean, the Stranger Things house is probably the least scary house that they have. And it really is, at least in my opinion, just going through and seeing different scenes that happened throughout the first season. Some better done than others, but it was just fun to go through. I love that they did the intro video in one part of it, which is such a silly thing, but
Jenny tried to skip it.
Yeah.
She always liked skipping the intro on Netflix.
It's a really short intro, too, which is really
Blasphemy.
kind of weird, but that's
One of the best parts of the show is the intro. How can you skip the intro? What are we doing here?
But some of the actors that they got to play the kids throughout is one of the better parts of the house because
And these are live actors standing there?
Yes.
Not like on a video.
correct.
Okay.
What's interesting about those kid actors is they're not kid actors. Those they all are over 18, and they just did them up with makeup and sort of
I
different
still
effects
can't
to keep
believe
them.
that. Like the one, yeah, the one girl who was playing 11 cannot be
Sure.
over 18.
She was. They all were. It's
I asked her.
It's mind blowing. No, I
Okay,
a lot,
Don.
Are you
a lot
over
of the-
18?
Hey, over 18. She said yes. I bought it. Come on.
But no, one of those girls actually came in. Fun fact: one of the 11 actresses came in from Washington State just to play her in this event. Like they put the call out for
18-year-olds who are 4'6".
Maybe
and
that's why
have
you
short
got
hair.
confused, Kenny. You're like, are you 18? And she's like, no, I'm 11. See, that's why I'm on this episode, even though I didn't go.
So you can bring in this fantastic humor.
I'm curious because it's been out a couple of years now, Stranger Things, and myself and Nick both watched it. I think right away, right? Pretty much.
Yeah.
But it took you a while to get into the show, and I finally got you to watch it to go to the event. What were your thoughts on the show as a whole?
I thought the first season was pretty much just delightful. It was.
Which I feel like that means that exceeded your expectations a little bit. Just because I know you were not looking forward to it.
Not necessarily.
Whatever, but like when we were seeing the trailers and whatnot, you were just like, well, that looks bad. Which I could understand.
Which is also impressive because it was talked up so much. I thought for sure you were going to go into it and be like kind of let down because it had been hyped up by everybody and their mother.
Yeah, the nice thing about Stranger Things is it has really good actual actors, but they also found a way to have both good child actors and the actors who aren't necessarily like great child actors are put into roles where they can succeed in.
Yeah.
In a show that is so much based around child actors, that's like a perfect example would be something like Home Alone, which Macaulay Culkin is not a great actor, wasn't a great child actor. Okay. But he was put into a situation where he as a person could succeed even though he has flaws in it, where people throughout Stranger Things just do that. And when you add that in with the amazing music that goes throughout, the wonderful camera work, even for a Netflix show, the great sound design throughout it, it all just kind of works well together. And it just had a very engaging story structure, and also too really benefited by only being 8 episodes.
Yeah,
Because
I agree.
I didn't need that story to be 18 episodes or something like that. And it wasn't, and you know what? That's what it should have been. So, yeah.
I will say really quickly, one thing I love about Stranger Things, and I'm not that big on it, like I think it's fine or whatever, but that I can watch it with my mom because she loves it, which is like about the only horror thing she'll watch, which obviously is not that scary, but to her it is, so it's kind of fun to watch. It's a very generational show.
Well, Stranger Things hits such a wide spectrum of fans. Anyone from kids to teens to middle age to older ages, and that's a big part of why Halloween Horror Nights slammed this year, because it's hitting all the demographics. It's something everybody's interested in, and so it's doing huge numbers at the gate for Universal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a great show. I love Stranger Things, and I can't wait to get to season 2. I haven't watched it myself yet either.
Whoa.
And holding off, waiting until after the event's over.
Yeah.
So
The other thing that's interesting about Stranger Things is that it really falls right into actually what a lot of Universal Studios used to be, like that feel of a lot of the rides that they had when it first opened. I mean, a lot of the early attractions are inspired by properties that Steven Spielberg was behind in some way, which, I mean, this even though he's not involved in Stranger Things, the kind of...
you may as well be.
I mean,
it's so inspired from the 80s and
the early...
E.T. and
yeah, AET is the obvious connection, but a lot of other just early kind of just
very much the Amblin
Sure.
Entertainment
Yes.
product of
Well
the
put.
2010s.
and it's a great little show, and I mean obviously it's a big show, but it's a great show that you honestly could binge watch and not be a crazy person. And at the same time, the attraction was just fun to go through. I mean, it wasn't super scary, but it was fun to see all of these little moments from the show. And there are some parts that were done really well. Unfortunately, the Demogorgon was at every fucking turn, which was a little bizarre.
Sure.
But at the same time, I mean, you got to try to be a haunted house.
there are some liberties in a haunted house you have to take. You can't be you can't be a movie scene for scene. You do have to hit certain things in a haunted house. But fortunately, I thought they hit all the beats that I wanted them to hit from the show. Were pretty much in the haunted house, and you touched on the score, the soundtrack for Stranger Things, and it was just beautifully executed in the haunted house. I thought going into the Upside Down, oh my god, that goddamn music going into the Upside Down and the scenes in the house. And just,
That's what I was going to ask, was if any of the rooms were like the Upside Down, and if so, just curious, because I feel like in any other scene there's like an arc to that, but whereas that scene, like, what would happen in the Upside Down room? Like, would it
you
mostly
just sort of explore the imagery from the show.
Yeah, I actually think it probably could have been done better. But
There
at the same
could have
time,
been a little bit more Upside Down, I thought.
they
But
didn't have any kind of like snow effect, which is weird.
was there?
Was it? Oh, okay.
We were also drinking heavily that night.
Ooh, yeah, we're gonna get into that. That's another part of Halloween Horror Nights
Well,
that
what's
makes it very
interesting-
successful.
Really quickly about Stranger Things is that I would say season 2 has a lot more of the Upside Down.
Nice.
So there's a lot more to pull from that second season. So maybe because they were
They're saving that for next year.
I was going to say maybe because they were adhering to that, they were just doing a very basic.
It'll be back next year. Season 2 will be there. And
I mean, with all the money they're just throwing in the truck and taking to the bank.
Fun fact about Steven Spielberg. I don't know if you know this about him with Universal Studios in general, but because he's got such a stake in that park, like the E.T. ride that's there, that he will not let them close. He actually does have a say in some of what happens at that park. I believe he invested in that park when it opened, and so for that, he actually gets a percentage of every ticket sold to Universal Studios.
Good for him.
And Halloween Horror Nights.
I'm sure he needs it.
So every guest that walks through that gate, he gets a percentage of it. I forget what the number
makes me feel like I don't want to go back.
It's actually, I believe, has been over $1 billion or $2 billion he's made just from that stake in Universal
Studios. Makes me feel that much worse.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But I just thought that was a fun fact.
Great. So, just an FYI, Nick is going to make...
He's going to make like a leaf.
An exit.
And leave.
Bye.
Yeah. So, he was able to join us for the beginning part of the episode and wanted to talk about Stranger Things a little bit with us. And now he's making his way out to bigger and better things. So, as far as the rest of the properties go... I mean, I guess we can just go through them first. I mean, you already mentioned Poltergeist, which is, I mean, that was just awesome. The haunted house, even though I may have had a little bit of alcohol before we went in that house.
Yeah, because we went in that house late in the night.
We did.
Yeah.
And I remember more about that house than some of the others, as I had stopped drinking a little bit before we went in that house, which is probably a good thing. But at the same time, it is definitely the best haunted house that they have.
Yeah.
And I'm just so happy that it turned out as well as it did, because a couple of the other houses that they had were not disappointing necessarily, but they just did not live up to exactly what I wanted them to be, even though they still were, fun while we were going through them, especially, as you already mentioned, with alcohol being involved. You're at least like able to enjoy the moment, even if it's not like a great haunted house.
Sure.
But the Poltergeist house was just awesome and so well put together. And I think it really does help that I had just seen the movie for the first time and liked it as much as I did, even though I don't love Poltergeist. I still think that a lot of the best parts of it were in the house, and it had just a great feel to it. And it
You son of a bitch. You moved the headstones. You didn't move the graves.
Yeah. What the fuck is going on?
And I love that you enter the haunted house, and that's the first thing you're slapped with is the pool scene from the backyard. And not actually Craig T. Nelson, but definitely a voice actor supposed to be Craig Nelson yelling, "You son of a bitch. You only moved the headstones."
Yeah.
It's just sort of... They
like they know what the best parts of the movie are.
Sure,
So.
but I guess what's odd is like they have to be so careful and walk such a fine line with that event of like, they can't go too over the top with things like language, but swearing in haunted houses is it's always been there with Horror Nights. They don't get too nutty with it, but like just to walk right into the haunted house and be slapped with a guy yelling "You son of a bitch" is just sort of like, wow, all right, well, they're
That's how you do it.
coming out of the gate strong with this one. But no, it's I'm with you. I just saw Poltergeist as well. Half the fun of Halloween Horror Nights is the lead up to the event and doing homework, as I refer to it as, and watching all the movies. It's fun to watch the ones I've never seen before. It's fun to catch back up on the ones that I have seen or just would like to catch back up on. Yeah. And Poltergeist was a new one for me, and so it was delightful. And I feel like of all the films this year that I had not previously watched, this one was the gem for sure. It's got such a sort of like warm, friendly sort of 80s vibe to it that you get out of something like...
I was going to say, the neighborhood feels a little bit like from the Tom Hanks movie, The Burbs.
Okay.
Like, it has that 80s kind of everything is awesome thing going on. And actually, it really never loses that throughout the film, even though they obviously get involved with the poltergeist and they have the, basically stand-ins for like the investigative ghost people come in, which are pretty prevalent in movies. And I mean, not as much as like an exorcism person or somebody like that, as those movies are just so tired. But in Poltergeist, it just has a very good flow to it. But also, too, it is one of the few horror movies I've seen that really hits all of the right notes with horror comedy, because a lot of horror movies are funny without trying to be funny. And a lot of horror movies that are comedic, it falls flat. And with Poltergeist, all of the things that were intentionally and unintentionally funny, all for the most part worked, and it was great.
Yeah, well, it's just a very well-written movie. First and foremost, if you pulled the horror elements out of Poltergeist, like, it's just a quality, well-done movie. It was directed by Tobe Hooper, who did...
Sort of.
Well, no, there was a lot of Spielberg involved with it up front, and then he had to pull away because he had obligations to E.T.
Which, over time, it's basically come out that he, for the most part, directed it.
Sure, and yeah, okay, so that's what you're saying.
I'm not saying that he didn't have any involvement in it.
Sure.
I'm just saying that Spielberg had even more hands-on with the film than was let on.
Yeah, and Tobe Hooper being the one who did the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the elements were there for the horror side of it, but I just think the fact that I believe it was written by Spielberg, or at least the screenplay was, or
could be.
Anyway, however, whatever the case is, like, it's just a well done movie.
And especially now being so many years removed from when it was originally released, I mean, a lot of the things that happen in it are quite silly, and I actually think it has aged very well for being the kind of horror movie it is. Like, you could see other movies from that time period, a movie I just mentioned, like The Burbs, which is not a horror movie, but it is stupid now if you watch it. And I mean, you could have fun with it when you watch it.
Sure.
But something like Poltergeist is really awesome because the silliness of it has just aged into being more intriguing. And it just works really well with, I mean, everything with like the clown, the spinning bed the clown is on, the tree that grabs the kid.
Which the tree animatronic in the house was fucking incredible. It's huge, and it moved.
Yeah.
And when you walk through the kitchen of the house, the steak on the counter moved. I don't know how they do that, but there's some sort of trickery to that. But it was just really cool to walk into the kitchen and all of a sudden the steak's moving. But the movie itself, the individual performances, I think, is what... It's just the story was great, the acting was great. The little girl that played Carol Ann is just fucking incredible, and she I've seen the second one, and she's great in that. And part of what makes the second movie as good, I believe, as the first one is they kept the whole cast intact, so the same family is all there, and it's just a nice continuation. But man, I love this movie. It's a really good movie.
It is, and it turned into a really good haunted house. Now, when we were talking about our thoughts on how the houses were going to be before we went, I'm sure I'm not the only person who's thought this, but the fact that Poltergeist basically all takes place in a house really lended itself to be ahead of the game when it comes to making a haunted house, I think.
I was hesitant on it at first, to be honest, only because I didn't know... sometimes that's a bit of a hindrance for a haunted house at Halloween Horror Nights, where they don't have a lot of other content to work with. You don't want to recreate the entire house from the movie room by room. That'd be kind of boring, if you will. Or even in the case of a couple of years ago with The Exorcist, I really was concerned about seeing The Exorcist recreated as a house, because I thought, well, this whole fucking movie was in one room. Well, they took creative liberties with it, and the way that they told that story in that haunted house was... I'm
interested. We've never really talked about it. Did they have anything with the girl walking backwards upstairs some way, or not?
Yeah, they did. They had a staircase with Reagan... At first, it was an animatronic, but then it broke, and then it was just a static figure coming down the stairs.
Okay.
So that was not the most impressive portion of that. It was a big letdown. But in hindsight, I don't know how they really could have executed that very well.
Get one of those actors from Six Flags who were bent over and just completely. That was
for 8 hours of the night, no problem.
Dude, I don't know. That person who was like that at that haunted house at Six Flags was freaking me out. I know you felt the same way.
Yeah. No, some of these scare actors that perform at these events are talented as hell, to say the least, in ways that you would not believe. Yep. But no, I had hope for Poltergeist as a house because they've executed so well on classic film properties in the past. One of my favorite movies ever became one of my favorite houses ever last year with The Shining. And they executed that at such a high level that that's what was giving me confidence with Poltergeist. And you and many, many, many other people have spoken this year. It's most people's favorite house this year from the event, and it's one of the strongest I've seen. I would maybe even go as far as to say it's the best intellectual property I've seen in a house. It's not the best house I've seen at the event, but as far as a house based on a property, it's probably the best I've seen.
Yeah. So before we go on to talking about the other two major properties, and then we'll hit on Blumhouse a little bit because their house was not so great. Before we get to that, talk a little more about some of the other things that happen around Halloween Horror Nights other than just the haunted houses. Okay. The drinking is part of the event for most people.
Big part.
I mean,
it's what makes the event tolerable for some people. All the significant others that Nick was wondering about.
Yes.
They get dragged along,
And it's hard because you had said that going there for one night only is not the best way to play it. And although I would definitely be in agreement after going, I will say we only really had the one night. Myself and Emily didn't want to take any days off work. So we only had the one night that we were going to be going to the event. And me, who has heard every single year from Kenny that drinking is such a big part of Halloween Horror Nights, I decided early on when we booked it that I was going to make the night count. So I did lots of drinking in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
And Universal had no problem obliging me with that, as if you have an ID and money or a credit card, they will give you any alcohol you want.
They've got a Blinky cup with your name on it.
Absolutely.
An absolute Halloween Horror Night tradition, the Blinky cups.
The other thing is, too, it's not like they're serving Miller Lite and everything. They've got, like, some really potent IPAs on draft.
Yeah.
Like, they are trying to get people drunk at their event.
Yeah, well, they've got bars that will sell you mixed drink. They sell hard liquor during the event. If you want to go into Finnegan's and get shots, you can do shots. But the temporary pop-up bars that they put around the park, this year they have expanded way beyond what they've ever done with their beer selection. And after partaking in many drinks over the night, I believe both of us were finished off, rightfully so, by a beer called the Hopsecutioner. Was definitely the cap on the night.
First of all, we were assholes and sent the ladies to go get in line for food.
Pizza fries.
Yes, because we are terrible human beings. I'm sure the discussion went something like, why don't you guys go get food while I get beer and sit? So they were in line for that, and we then got the Hopsecutioner, the double IPA, followed by just stuffing our faces with pizza fries. And that beer just, I mean, I know you didn't finish yours.
No.
Like, it was bad.
It's criminal to pour out beer in general, but a $10 beer, that I was in a sad state at that point where it was like I was faced with, well, we have about 3 hours of this event left that we just paid way too much money to be at in the first place. If I finish this beer, I will effectively ruin the rest of my night and possibly the big day we had planned for the next day. So yes, I they loaded us up with so much liquor and so much beer and so much junk food that I effectively poured out more than half of my Hopsecutioner, which is a beer that I love.
Yeah.
But if you're not careful with Halloween Horror Nights, you can overdo it. You need to come in and practice caution. And I am a seasoned veteran at this event. I should have known better.
We were all having a good time.
We were. But yes.
Well, you also knew you were coming back, so
Sure.
that was good for you.
Yeah.
For me, a lot of the houses just kind of
Became
ran
a blur.
together. Yeah.
Well, that's
And-
actually a thing. That is the Halloween Horror Nights blur we all do experience. But yeah, you overdid it in the one night you had, and
Sure.
that's fine.
Which the good thing is that I remember a lot about the Poltergeist house, and again, it was nice that was a little bit later, so I had time to like have some brain cells regenerate, so
sure.
I could remember a few things about
Now,
it.
do you remember any of the house we did after the Hopsecutioners Trick or Treat?
I remember very little of it, and we'll go into talking about that.
Sure.
Trick or Treat was a film that I had never seen.
Okay.
Like most of the things that we talked
The
about.
Michael Dougherty film.
Yeah.
Same guy who did Krampus, which you've also never seen.
I have never seen Krampus.
That's coming this Christmas. I will be making you watch Krampus.
Okay, great. I'm looking forward to it.
Nice.
I was almost resigned the other day because I was telling Toussaint that unfortunately I've started to get more into horror movies as you and Nick have basically just beat me into submission.
Just
so.
forced our will on you with
Pretty much. Because you came in and, I mean, in all honesty, like you were not the excessive horror fan that you are now when we started doing Film Tank back in 2015.
It's always been there, but it's
the
become
extent-
a
no.
thing over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
It's really become
And
a thing. Yeah.
now Nick has joined on with that, and he's just like, "Ooh, I'm excited! I found another shitty horror movie on Shudder," and it is, God. Speaking of Shudder, they bought the exclusive streaming rights for Mandy, the movie I was telling you about
I
that we
saw that.
reviewed on.
They literally just had it on. I was looking at it last night. It's listed on there as coming soon.
Yeah.
Which is frustrating because I've been wanting to watch it. And that's,
Yeah, but I'm sure since they bought the rights to it, I'm sure it'll be on there
Yeah.
probably at the beginning of November.
they also have exclusive rights to a new show I've been watching called Channel Zero, which is fucking incredible. It's a sci-fi exclusive, but they've got the exclusive streaming rights to it. Really good show.
probably
really-
never watch it, but
Probably not, but it's really good for anybody listening.
good recommendation for anyone who's into horror.
Yes.
Yeah, I am like not in the neighborhood of getting a subscription to Shudder, but
It's cheap.
I've actually thought about it for like a second, which is way more than I ever thought I
Just
would.
use my login or something. Just try it out for a little while.
Probably. Thanks for putting that on the internet. That's great. Just use my login. It's fine. So Trick or Treat.
Yeah.
There is one part of the Trick or Treat film that I absolutely loved, and actually the rest of the film I thought was just not that great.
Sure.
But the part with the kids who pretty much everybody agrees are all psychopaths. They're on a special bus. They're in handcuffs on the bus.
Well, they're mentally handicapped kids, so they're not, I wouldn't go as far as to say that they're just insane.
I
It's
mean,
the parents of the kids.
film says that the society treats them as if they are guilty.
Right. But it's more or less a take on the parents and the society around the kids that were driven crazy. Everybody in the
It
movie.
is and it isn't. Like, it's not like Nightmare on Elm Street, where it's like the parents burned this fucking guy alive, and now they are the ones who are going to fuck their kids over.
It was a take on how fucked up the parents are because they're burdened, as the movie said, quotes, burdened by these kids, these monsters that they called them. They're mentally handicapped kids, and the parents effectively were sick and tired of dealing with it, and
But
they
the
paid this guy off to drive the school bus full of them into a quarry.
But the film makes it seem like everyone was on board that these kids were all soon-to-be murderers.
I mean, sure.
And you're right. I mean,
Yeah,
it is pretty much up for interpretation
Sure.
for anybody who's watching the movie. But that part was by far my favorite part of the film, just because I was intrigued by this idea that somebody would handcuff these children in a bus, and the fact that the driver would stop the bus and hand out candy to them before trying to drive them off a cliff, I thought was very bizarre and also quite intriguing.
Yeah.
And then we have everything that happens with them years later, once the kids from the other part of the story join in on what's happened to these kids and the bus and everything. That was the part that I was really excited about for the house, and I do remember that part of the house. Everything else about it,
Sure.
no memory of it.
The house itself is not great
Yeah.
by any means, unfortunately, but it's beautifully executed as far as the imagery and the scenes that they did recreate from the movie. And as I mentioned before, there's scare zones throughout the event, and last year Trick or Treat was involved with Halloween Horror Nights as one of the scare zones, and it was pretty much a runaway winner as far as popularity goes. People loved it as a scare zone. And so this year they made it into a house. And it's getting a lot of the same reaction that the scare zone got, where it's not necessarily scary, but it's beautiful. It's gorgeous to look at.
Yeah.
I was excited about that. I love this movie. I love Trick or Treat. I know I like it considerably more than you do as a film.
Yeah.
But I was really excited that there was so much to work with. If you've not seen the movie, it's an
anthology
It's
film.
an anthology film, and there's 5 storylines, I believe, or 4 storylines that run throughout it.
Yeah, I mean, there's 3 major ones that are kind of happening throughout the storyline. But yeah, the story with the witches is a major storyline.
And you got the kids.
Yeah, everything with involving the
You
kids.
got the principal, who's a psychopath for sure.
Yes, but a lot of those storylines kind of bleed together and become one.
Yeah.
And then there's the main storyline with what's his name,
Sam.
The
Icon.
icon.
He's the icon of it, and he's the main thread through the movie. And
He's
Sam,
on my T-shirt.
Sam is on your T-shirt. I love that you're wearing your Horror Nights T-shirt.
I am. I mean, I was excited to do
The
this
focal
episode.
point is absolutely 11 because they know where their bread's
I
buttered.
mean, come on now. You got
Yeah.
11, and you have the Demogorgon pretty much
yeah.
right above her with his non-existent face wide open.
Yeah, it's a great shirt.
It is.
But yeah, no, Sam I think is a great character in general, and so it was fun and exciting to have Sam back at the event after last year, and I was excited to see him in a house. Unfortunately, sort of like you mentioned with the Demogorgon in the Stranger Things house, they sort of abused Sam, like he was sort of all over the place. He's everywhere, and not enough of the evil Sam at the end when he takes his bag off his head and it's just this horrible pumpkin face. There was not enough of that Sam in the
Which,
house.
unfortunately, I mean, that's just financially
Sure.
responsible.
Yeah, well, the makeup crew for Horror Nights is pretty good. They can pull that
They
off.
are, but boy, you save a lot of money by just putting a bag over somebody's head.
I suppose. But I was happy that the bus was in the house. They actually had the bus in there. I thought the scene was very well executed when you're at the bottom of the quarry after the bus has crashed. Everything that I wanted to see from the movie made it to the house.
Yeah.
So it was satisfying in that way, but it just wasn't a scary house. And that's the interesting thing about having 10 haunted houses at an event. They can't all be the best.
Right.
So there's going to be different varying degrees of how they execute and all that. And
Right. I mean, if you stuck the house for Trick or Treat at Six Flags Great America, it would be by far the best thing you saw there.
Sure. And there are different tones, like movies. There are different tones that they set in these houses, and some of them you just need to sort of step back and realize, like, oh, it wasn't really meant to be scary, but as an attraction, by and large, like, it was great. You know, it's a good haunted house attraction, but it's not really a very scary haunted house.
Yep.
So I enjoyed it, but not as much as I enjoy the movie.
And that is very fair. I remember very little about the haunted house, so I have nothing to bring to this. Another house that extremely abused its icon was the Halloween 4 house.
Oh, boy.
Which, I mean, unfortunately, Mike Myers is... Michael Myers, whatever you want to call him, is the only thing keeping the Halloween series going.
Sure.
As is the same with Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street.
Sure.
The icon is what keeps people interested in coming back because they have a personality even if they don't talk. And they're the most interesting character of this franchise. And it seemed like they were pretty resigned to that with Halloween for the haunted house because All I remember is that Michael Myers was seriously, they pretty much just could have had a house that was empty with just a bunch of him running around.
Yeah. I mean, you got Michael Myers and you have the Halloween score, the music, and that's basically, if you're as into the franchise as a lot of people are, myself included, it's fine. Like, just having Michael Myers involved in your event is a win to begin with. The detriment I felt to this house, the movie, say what you want about it, didn't really translate to this house very well. I mean, they recreated some of it. I mean, some of the scenes were there. It's fine.
It seemed like Universal wanted to have Michael Myers at this event.
Sure. And Halloween 4 is not a great film. I enjoy it definitely more than I think a lot of people do. But let's be honest, the first one is an all-time classic. The second one, not as popular, but at least most people can agree is still good.
And the series went off the rails in the third one.
Sure.
Because it didn't have Michael Myers, which obviously was a mistake.
Tried to rein it back in with the fourth one,
right.
Which was just sort of a loose retelling of the first one.
And then I mean, it continues on, and then you get H2O and the zombie films and all the other sequels that come before that, and we're going to be talking about Halloween, and actually Kenny's going to be nice enough to join us again, his third episode in October of this year, which is amazing.
Yeah,
which these will probably be released sometime around Christmas, so that'll be great. But Kenny obviously loves horror films and is very excited for the new Halloween film. And we're going to have fun talking about it on the episode with myself, he, and Nick, since Tucson won't be able to join us for that one either. But, you know, the Halloween series is very bizarre to me because unlike something like Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, there's been almost no growth throughout the entire series. Like, it seems like they've been on that same beat since the first film. And even though there's been some changes along the way, the only really reason is because people haven't wanted to come back for their later films. At least that's my reading of it. And I haven't seen all of them, so I guess I'm not. I'm talking on my ass a little bit, but at the same time, the storyline has really been the same ever since the first film. Even in the zombie films, it's really, even though he has a different take on it, the first Zombie Halloween remake is really close to what the first film is, even though it takes liberties throughout it.
It's very close. It goes a lot more into sort of detailing him as a character. It gives a lot more backstory to his upbringing and stuff like that. But it's just a lot more backstory, but then follows, like you said, very closely.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, at least 3, maybe 4 specific moments use exact dialogue. Like, they recreate scenes almost exactly.
No, I mean, it is very similar to the original Halloween.
Although, now, Zombies number 2 goes haywire.
Which Zombies number 2 is fantastic.
No, it's a good movie.
And a lot of people hate it, and they are wrong, but that's okay.
And when we reviewed the first...
We did an episode on the original Halloween and the Zombie Halloween on the same episode.
And we didn't talk the second one much.
We did not.
Okay. Yeah, we recently rewatched the
we did, before we went and saw the Rob Zombie concert.
Yeah. So that was fun.
I love the second Rob Zombie Halloween film.
No, look, don't get me wrong. A lot of people dislike the zombie versions of Halloween. I quite enjoy them, not as much as the originals, but I definitely enjoy them. They're just enough of a departure to make it feel like it's a worthy remake. Like, if you're gonna remake it, you might as well bring something new to the table.
And he did, so, especially in the second.
Sure. But getting back to Halloween 4, Halloween 4, there's a lot of good there. It felt almost like a desperate attempt at reining the franchise back in. As you mentioned, they got really off the rails with the third one, and this was sort of the attempt to zero it back in. That said, some of the kills in Halloween 4 are just...
Oh, sure.
Oh, God. When he gets a hold of the paramedic in the ambulance and sticks his thumb in the guy's forehead, just fucking incredible. And then the time when he sticks, I think her name's Kelly, fucking takes his shotgun and just shoves it right through her and sticks her to the wall with the shotgun. Oh, man.
Unfortunately, that's like a prerequisite now for any horror film.
Sure.
That especially a property that is completely based around an icon.
Yeah.
Like, they have got to have amazing kills, and if they
Right.
don't, it's a disappointment.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately for this house, getting back to the event, I did not get a chance to see. In 2014, they did the first Halloween, and I believe that was voted House of the Year that year. People loved it and hold that in a very high regard. I did get to see when they did Hell Comes, or whatever the second one was called, Hell Comes Back to Haddonfield or some shit. I did get to see in 2016 the Halloween 2 house, and it was very good. Very, very good. That's what hurts this one, is that the first two were such beloved houses at the event. This one's just kind of an average.
Well, the other thing
run-of-the-mill.
about this one is it feels like this one was kind of just like, we just want to have Michael Myers, and that's the
Yeah.
reason why we have this here, and whatever.
Yeah.
We'll find a property that has him.
Sure, right. And it's very odd that in a year where the reboot of the franchise, if you will, with the new 2018 Halloween coming out, that they didn't go with that. But the overarching theme of the event this year was the 80s. And so
Yeah.
I think part of that played into they wanted a Halloween film from the 80s, and this sort of stayed in line, in order.
Which is interesting because, you know, the Halloween Horror Nights event has previously had, as horror movies do, had icons throughout their event.
Yeah.
And this year they didn't have one, which you said has kind of been a thing recently.
The last couple, they come and go. They've had icons over the years, and then they'll go through a couple of years where they don't, and then they brought them back in 2015, the first year that I went. 25 and 26
Yep.
had icons, and then last year there was not. This year there's not. So
Well, but and I mean, you don't necessarily need to have one, obviously.
Stranger Things is more or less the icon.
Oh,
this year.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're coming to a close here, and we didn't really talk about the original houses, and we probably won't talk
no,
much
that's
about
fine.
them.
Yeah.
But some of the original houses were actually very fun here, and it's a credit to the people who do Halloween Horror Nights, as obviously the draw for people who are coming to the event are the names. I mean, the T-shirt doesn't have any characters from the original houses.
No,
like
sure.
the draw is
The properties.
Stranger Things, and
The properties sell tickets.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
what brings people in. Like the hardcore fans love the original stuff, and even people. I'm not going to sell anybody. I'm sure a lot of people come to the event for properties and then end up loving some of the original houses.
which I did, and I know you did at the same time. But for the common person who's not obsessed with Halloween or horror movies or Universal Halloween Horror Nights, I mean, they're coming because of the properties.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely.
But for the most part, overall, I thought the original houses were actually really well put together.
They're always my favorite. And without fail, every year I've been, original property houses have come away my favorites. And by and large, each year, that's what I look forward to the most. But as I mentioned up top in the episode, what keeps me coming back to this event, I can see original houses anywhere.
Yeah.
I love them here, but the properties and how well they're executed is what keeps me coming back to Horror Nights.
And I guess we'll close with the last property that was there, which was Blumhouse, and their bizarre house that included Happy Death Day
And the first Purge.
The first Purge, which came out earlier this year. This house just missed a lot of marks, mainly because these combination haunted houses, there was a way it could have been done, and it could have been great, and they chose to not even care about that and just say, here's two things in one house, and we're just going to put them together, and it makes no sense. And when you're in a haunted house and you're trying to just enjoy the moment when you're in it, if you have two things that are separate and have nothing to do with each other, it completely kills the vibe for me.
Well, yes, I can see that for sure, and I agree with you. This was not a very good house by any means. A little bit of quick backstory. Last year was the first time there was a partnership with Halloween Horror Nights and Blumhouse. And last year they had Blumhouse Volume 1. It was the Purge was involved. The Insidious final chapter was soon to come out. It was basically like a live preview of the movie. And then I forget what the third part of it was, but that house was actually pretty well executed. This year, fast forward, they kept that partnership going, and it was chapter 2 of Blumhouse, and they brought in these two things, and it just felt very odd. It just didn't feel well executed. Happy Death Day, we watched that also for the first time together. The movie was decent. Like, the movie was pretty solid.
There's so much you could have done with the movie, though.
Sure.
And they did nothing with it in the house, which really took away from it.
Yeah. There's not much really to say about it. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it.
I only want to mention it because it was an actual property that was there.
Sure.
But it was disappointing, to say the least.
And it's odd because, again, with Halloween's a Blumhouse movie, the new one, right? I think Blumhouse is producing the new one.
I don't think so.
No?
No.
Huh.
I'll find out, but I don't think so.
We'll see. Well, I see you're looking it up.
That's all we do on the show.
While you're looking that up, I will also briefly mention before we end the episode, because there's not much more to say about the Blumhouse house at the event. There were two. This is not the first time, but one of the first times at the event that they brought intellectual properties.
You are correct, by the way.
Okay.
Blumhouse is involved in this, although Miramax is the main company.
Sure. I thought so. And I thought that was kind of odd that Blumhouse wasn't just... I'm surprised they didn't just strong-arm the event and feature the new Halloween as a house for the event instead of Halloween 4. But there are so many back channel workings with the properties in the event and how all that works. It's a very convoluted mess. Yeah. But as I was pointing out, the last thing I do want to mention, they don't normally bring properties in for the scare zones. Obviously, they did last year with Trick or Treat. They've done it before. They've had The Walking Dead as a scare zone before. It's happened. But this year, two of the scare zones were properties, and one of them you mentioned at the top of the show was Chucky. Was pretty underwhelming. I've heard mixed things about how it's improved or stayed the same. I felt like Chucky was actually the weak point of the scare zone.
I would agree.
And all of the different toys featured throughout the franchise.
Yeah, they were fun. It was like you got to the Chucky thing, and I was expecting it to be hilarious, and it was a big bummer.
Very bland.
Yeah.
But that said, the other scare zone that's featuring a property this year, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And this is a property that a lot of the creative team have been on record as saying this was like their white whale to get for the event, was to finally tie down that property and utilize it. And it has been a smashing success with the fans. People fucking love Killer Clown Scare Zone. Those clowns are executed so well. I don't think you've seen the movie.
No,
right?
I have not.
I love the movie. This is another one that in doing my homework this year I watched for the first time. The clown costumes are spot on. They're great. But if it works so well as a scare zone because they're not put in these parameters of being in a haunted house where they have to recreate these scenes. It's just the characters out on the streets and interacting and sort of improvising with the visitors. And it's great. They do so many things from the movie that are they've got sort of the script that they're kind of sticking to, but improvising at the same time, and it's fantastic. The ice cream truck that you see in the movie is there. There's like a hand puppet thing that they're doing a projection of. If you look up top over the scare zone on the building, they're doing like a projection of this hand puppet thing, and it's just incredible. There's one scene where one of the clowns blows up a balloon and turns it into a dog, and the dog is what follows the humans when they're trying to find them. And one of the clowns in the scare zone has a balloon dog that he walks around looking for humans. It's fantastic.
That's pretty. I don't remember that. But
The cotton candy cocoons are all there. It's incredible. If you're a fan of Killer Clowns, they're doing it justice in the scare zone. So that's been very fun.
Well, overall, I think that it was a really good time going to Halloween Horror Nights, and I did enjoy a lot of the houses. And at the same time, I thought it was just fun to go through the event. So I'm glad we went, and glad we were able to talk about it.
Glad you enjoyed it. I'm glad I finally got you to go. I thank you for going and indulging me with that, but also I'm glad we're doing this episode. It's been fun.
Yeah, it's been fun to chat about them and also the movies that and other properties that
absolutely
bring this whole thing together. So
next bonus episode, I'll introduce you to horror Christmas movies.
I'm pretty much resigned to it now at this point, unfortunately. Thank you very much to Kenny Marcellus for joining us today, and Nick Cheney for the abbreviated time he was on this episode. I am Alex Diekman. Thank you very much. Kenny's got something
else.
If
I may, really quick,
okay.
if you would like to hear more about the event itself. A shameless plug here.
Okay.
My other podcast, The Grim Grinning Hosts, we go way, way further than you probably ever want in detail about Halloween Horror Nights this year.
And how do you find Grim Reading Hosts?
You find it on iTunes or anywhere you find any
Just by
podcast.
searching Grim Grinning Hosts?
Grim Grinning Hosts. You can find us on Twitter, GGH Podcast.
Okay.
That's where we pretty much do all of our stuff. So find us and give it a listen.
Wonderful. Sorry I stepped in her dick there about that.
Not a problem.
So from Kenny Marcellus and Nick Cheney, myself, Alex Diekman, thank you very much, as always, for joining us here on Film Tank. We'll be catching up with you next time.